I felt betrayed for two reasons. One is the policies of Donald Trump. Now, I've been critical of other GOP presidential candidates. I was critical of George W. Bush. I've been critical I was critical of Barack Obama on things too. So, but the way Trump doubled down on things like race, on things like immigration, the nativism or the xenophobia associated with that, the way he would take his kind of, he often referred to the race, we have the Mexicans and the blacks, and this was often applied to kind of his policy decisions. So there seemed to be this kind of ugly populism that was emerging, which is very much tied to kind of a racial, kind of nativist fear mongering kind of, we need to protect our borders with a wall. So I thought none of these things mesh very well with my understanding of what Christianity is, evangelical Christianity is. So there was certainly the policy, right? And so on the other hand, you had the character issues, right? That evangelicals would sort of sell their moral authority to speak truth to the world for a handful of Supreme Court justices or this or that kind of social or cultural issue. For me, the fact that this man had a history of all kinds of, involved with the porn industry, he was crude, he disrespected women, the things he said about his opponents, we could go into specifics about that. I'm a believer that there needs to be a kind of some kind of moral fabric to a republic in order for the republic to work. Now, where you find that morality, we can debate that question. I've written a little bit about that elsewhere. But a moral republic needs some kind of moral leader, some person of character, and he was not it. And I think you could make an argument against him, not even a Christian argument. I mean, he's just not good for America. But yet evangelicals were so driven by their culture war, win the culture war, get the justices we need, elect the right guy. This kind of model, this playbook, I call it in the book, this playbook for winning the culture, that they were willing to overlook all the character flaws. And that was the second thing, of course, that bothered me. I think it bothered a lot of other evangelicals. I think that character issue bothered most evangelicals, whether they voted for Trump or not. But ultimately, the playbook, how to win the culture wars by electing the right justices and the right congressman and the right president, was so overwhelmingly strong and had been so inculcated, so indoctrinated into the way evangelicals today think about politics, that I should have seen it coming. I should have, I should have seen this, if you look at the past 50 years. Right? This was all building up to this point. Now, I tend to think of this as kind of a last gasp of the kind of old Christian right. I think that most of the people who voted for Trump are kind of came of age during the late 70s and 80s, when people like Jerry Falwell and the Christian right were kind of articulating this playbook for how to win the culture for the first time. I think the average Trump voter is 57 years old. So I do have hope, especially as I look at young people in Christian colleges, like Messiah College where I teach, who are much more interested in different kinds of questions related to justice and social ills and those kinds of things in terms of how they exercise their faith. But I think I think I see this as a kind of last gasp. I think in the book I call it, I occasionally teach a course on the Civil War, and some of your viewers might remember the last great engagement at the Battle of Gettysburg, Pickett's charge, where the Confederacy made one last charge, before they were and almost were successful before they were kind of beat back once and for all. And those who know their Civil War history know kind of the war kind of went downhill from that point. So I hope that's what happened. That's what's going to happen. That's what we're seeing here. But so as I looked back, I looked at the last 50 years. I saw all of these kind of grievances that evangelicals believed were happening, that whether they be kind of sexual politics, the abortion, ERA, the women's rights movement. Evangelicalism has always been a very kind of patriarchal culture. So, I think there's a reaction to that. I think there was a reaction to integration, racial integration, desegregation. I think there were prayer in public schools, Bible taking out of public schools, prayer removed from public schools. I think there's this perfect storm that kind of emerges in the 60s and 70s that prompts people like Jerry Falwell and others to sort of establish again this kind of political playbook to win the culture back. And Trump proved that, just how powerful that playbook really is and continues, was and continues to be, even to the point that someone like Donald Trump could win.